Quote, "We define computational literacies as a set of practices situated in a social-cultural context which utilize external computational media to support cognition and communication. Computational literacies encompass phenomena at scales from the individual to the societal, as well as connections between three phenomena and the media which supports and shapes them," end quote. Okay, so let's kind of break this down a little bit. So the first part, we define computational literacies as a set of practices situated in a social cultural context. Okay, so the things that you would learn through computational literacies are relevant within the real world. That's kind of like one way that you can look at this. So instead of just learning a concept for the sake of learning a concept, it's, oh, this is embedded within something you actually use in social cultural context, so outside of the classroom. So rather than call this a set of concepts, it's saying practices. So practices is something that you do rather than just conceptualize or understand or think through. So this is much more action-oriented than the word computational thinking, where you're just thinking. You don't necessarily have an action associated with that, although you certainly can. The wording itself does not lend itself to a doing, but instead of a conceiving or thinking through. Okay, so now let's look at the second half of this sentence. So the first part was talking about practices situated in socio-cultural contexts, which utilize external computational media to support cognition and communication. So it's saying it utilizes external computational media. Okay, so rather than just thinking computationally, you're actually using media, specifically computational media, in those practices that you're doing. This is very different. Computational thinking initially started as like thinking as a computer scientist or thinking as how a computer might solve a problem. And in my opinion, it moved so far away from that that you didn't even need to think about computers or computer scientists at all to engage in this very watered down version of problem solving that happened to be labeled computational thinking, simply because it has some labels within it that were related to computer science, like decomposition, abstraction, algorithms, pattern recognition, etc. This definition of computational literacies, however, specifically focuses on computational media. So it's bringing it back to computing, not just thinking. But the very last part of this, of supporting cognition and communication, I like the fact that it helps with the thinking side of things, the understanding, cognition, but also how to communicate. It's important for people to engage in computational literacies, not just as a problem-solving tool, but to also be able to communicate things. And if we go to that second sentence where it was talking about the phenomena on the scale from individual to societal, it's important to be able to communicate as an individual how computing is relevant to you, but also how it impacts society. So for example, if you're going to go into more of the critical framings of computational literacies, thinking of how computing can oppress others, either intentionally or unintentionally, being able to communicate that and to be able to understand how it does that and then engage in practices that can have an impact on that, hopefully improve that, is important. And then the very last part, so the quote of connections between these phenomena and the media that supports and shapes them, is saying that there's a relationship between the two. So rather than having unidirectional, like this computing device has an impact on people, but people don't have an impact on computing, it says that there is a relationship that you need to figure out how one shapes the other, and vice versa. And I think this is very important. So after that little bit of a ramble, I'm going to read this quote again one more time from pages 3 and 4. Quote, "We define computational literacies as a set of practices situated in a social cultural context which utilize external computational media to support cognition and communication. Computational literacies encompass phenomena at scales from the individual to the societal, as well as connections between these phenomena and the media which supports and shapes them." End quote. This excerpt of the CSK8 podcast was from episode number 111 and is titled Revaluation of Computational Thinking in K-12 Education, Moving Toward Computational Literacies.